Hello, dear YouTube viewers, I hope you're doing well. Okays, let's start our video. The house was alive with chatter, the kind that only comes when something exciting is on the horizon. Relatives spoke over one another, laughter ringing out as they swapped plans about food, travel arrangements, and what old songs they would sing together again. It sounded like joy, like home, like the kind of gathering everyone longed for. Sitting in the next room, I couldn't help but feel a spark of anticipation. Of course, I would be part of this too. Why wouldn't I? It was family. Then, in the middle of their planning, my father's voice cut through the noise. He said it so casually, so dismissively, like it meant nothing at all. It's just a reunion. You don't need to come. At first, I thought he must be joking. I laughed, light and nervous, waiting for someone to correct him, for him to smile and say he didn't mean it. But no one did. The laughter in the room carried on, the conversations flowed, and my presence, or absence, seemed irrelevant. The words landed like a stone in my chest, heavy and cold. I sat in silence, unsure if I'd misheard, or if the sting of rejection was really that sharp. This wasn't the first time my father had made me feel small. 100 memories crowded in, uninvited. The spelling bee I had one in school, he never came. My drawing that hung in the classroom window, he dismissed it as childish doodling. Every time I had tried to shine, he had been there to dim the light, to compare me to my siblings who were always, in his eyes, brighter, stronger, more worthy. Yet, despite everything, I had spent years craving even the smallest nod of approval from him. A good job. A well done. Something. Anything. And now, this reunion. This event that had everyone buzzing with excitement felt like my one chance to belong, to finally be recognized as part of the family. But instead, I was pushed aside before I could even ask to join. I glanced at my mother, hoping she would speak up, say it wasn't fair, say I deserved to be there too. But she kept her eyes down, her lips pressed tight. She had always chosen silence over confrontation, and this time was no different. My siblings tried, in their way, to soften the blow. Don't take it personally, one of them said with a half smile. Another shrugged, you know how Dad is. Their words stung more than they soothed. Easy for them to say, they were all going. The truth settled in slowly, like a shadow spreading across the room. Everyone would be there except me. They would laugh, eat, sing, and create memories without me. And I would be left behind, not because of chance or mistake, but by deliberate choice. Questions swirled in my mind. Why me? What was so wrong with me that my father couldn't bear to include me? Why was I always the one left outside the circle, watching through the glass while everyone else sat at the table? The reunion, once a simple family gathering, had become something more, a symbol of belonging, of recognition, of being seen. And with just one sentence, my father had slammed the door on all of it. The days leading up to the reunion felt like living inside someone else's life. Everywhere in the house, there was movement. Bags being pulled from cupboards, new clothes laid out on beds, and the constant buzz of relatives dropping by with last-minute lists and laughter. The air smelled of new perfume and freshly pressed outfits, of food preparations and travel plans. Everyone moved with a kind of lightness, an energy that came only with anticipation of something special. I walked among them, but it was as if I wasn't really there. I was invisible, drifting like a ghost in my own home. Conversations dropped when I entered the room, or maybe I just imagined they did. Either way, I didn't feel part of them. They were preparing for a world I didn't belong to, a celebration I wasn't allowed to witness. In the corner of my room sat my own suitcase, untouched, empty, almost mocking me. I stared at it sometimes, wondering if I should pack it anyway, just in case someone changed their mind. But deep down, I knew no miracle was coming. Finally, I gathered the courage to confront my father. My voice trembled at first, but grew steadier as I asked the question that had been burning inside me. Why am I not invited? He looked at me with the same expression he always wore when I dared to challenge him, boredom wrapped in irritation. It's just a reunion, he said flatly. Don't make it dramatic. Just a reunion. The words cut deeper than if he had shouted. They weren't an answer. They were a dismissal. I felt my chest tighten. If it's just a reunion, I shot back, my voice cracking between anger and hurt. Then why exclude me? Why am I the only one who can't go? He didn't even blink. Silence stretched between us, heavy, suffocating. He leaned back in his chair, eyes drifting away as if the conversation was already over. No explanation, no attempt to soothe or reason, just that curtain of silence that had been his weapon for years. It was his way of saying, "Your questions don't matter. You don't matter." The night of departure came like a cruel performance. The house glowed with excitement, everyone dressed in their best. My sisters twirled in front of mirrors, adjusting earrings and hair, while my brother laughed loudly with a cousin about the food they were going to devour. My mother fussed over last-minute details, her face lit with the rare joy of anticipation. And then there was me, standing in the hallway, trying to make myself small as the flurry of movement swirled around me. No one looked at me, not really. They were too busy stepping into a night that was forbidden to me. The final sound was the slam of the door as they left, a sound that echoed through the empty house like a verdict. Final. Unforgiving. I sat down on the cold floor, staring at the quiet walls that had once held all that noise. My chest ached, and tears spilled before I could stop them. The silence pressed in from every side. For the first time, I truly felt like an outsider, not just in the family but in my own home. In that silence, memories rose unbidden, each one a sharper blade than the last. I remembered being pushed out of group photos, standing to the side, while everyone else linked arms. I remembered the way Dad would praise my brother's cricket trophies, my sister's singing voice, while smirking at my achievements as though they were meaningless hobbies. I remembered school events where I searched the crowd for his face, only to realize he hadn't bothered to come. Each memory was a stitch in the fabric of rejection, a pattern I had been too blind or too hopeful to see. And now, this reunion exclusion wasn't random, wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the natural conclusion of years of quiet, deliberate choices. I wasn't forgotten. I was excluded. I wasn't overlooked. I was unwanted. The weight of that realization sat heavy on my chest. This wasn't about one night, one party, or one reunion. This was about a lifetime of being told, in every way possible, that I didn't belong. When the house finally settled into silence after their departure, I thought the worst of the pain was over. I had endured the humiliation of being left behind, the ache of watching the door slam in my face. But the truth came creeping in the following days, and it was far more cruel than the loneliness. My phone buzzed constantly, filling with notifications I didn't want but couldn't resist opening. Social media was merciless. Pictures poured in, smiling faces pressed close together, arms slung around shoulders, tables groaning with food, cousins singing songs I had grown up hearing. Everyone looked radiant, glowing with the warmth of shared history. And in every photo, in every burst of laughter frozen in pixels, I wasn't there. At first, it was simply more of the same pain, confirmation that life had gone on without me, that the world hadn't stopped to notice my absence. But then I noticed something different. A picture caught my eye. My grandfather, solemn and proud, holding up a stack of papers while the family gathered around. Another photo followed, this one with my father at the center, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. Captions spilled the truth I was never supposed to see. The reunion hadn't just been about food and laughter. It was about legacy. That night, my grandfather had announced his will, formally passing the family business and property to the next generation. It was the kind of event that shaped futures, the kind of gathering where roles were decided and voices were recognized. Except mine. I stared at the photos until my vision blurred. It wasn't just a reunion. It was the moment everything changed, and I had been cut out before I even knew what was happening. The betrayal clawed at my insides until I couldn't hold it anymore. I called my mother first. My voice shook as I asked her what had happened, why no one had told me. She hesitated, too long. That hesitation was the answer before her words even came. "It was your father's decision," she whispered. "He thought it would be easier this way." Easier for whom? Not for me. For him. Still, I needed more. I turned to one of my cousins, someone I had always trusted more than the rest. At first, they tried to dodge my questions, but when I pressed harder, the truth spilled out. My father hadn't just left me behind out of spite. He had done it intentionally, making sure I wasn't present when the inheritance was announced. My name hadn't been spoken at all. My branch of the family tree had been clipped, quietly and permanently. It wasn't only about money or property, it was about being erased. My father hadn't wanted me to represent the family, not in front of the elders, not in front of history. To him, I was the flaw in the picture, the mistake that shouldn't be carried forward. Hearing it laid out like that hollowed me out from the inside. It wasn't just his cruelty anymore, it was everyone's silence. My mother's, who let it happen. My siblings, who had gone along. My cousins, who smiled for the camera while I sat at home. The betrayal wasn't in a single act, it was in the collective choice to accept my absence. The rage came first, hot and violent. I wanted to scream, to smash my phone, to tear the pictures into pieces. But beneath the rage was grief, a slow and endless ache that pressed into my bones. I wasn't just excluded from a party, I had been denied my place in the story of my own family. That night, I sat awake, staring into the dark, my thoughts swinging between emptiness and fury. For a long time, I felt suspended between two paths, to stay broken, crushed under the weight of rejection, or to carve out something new, something my father could never erase. It was the lowest I had ever been. But deep in that hollow space, a small voice whispered, "You don't need his permission to exist. You don't need his permission to matter." The crossroads lay before me, stark and undeniable. Either I would remain the ghost my father had made me, or I would step out of the shadows and claim a life that was my own. In the days that followed, I made a decision that surprised even me. I would not chase. I would not beg to be included in a family that had already shown me where I stood. The temptation was there, moments when I wanted to scream at my father, demand answers, demand space in a history that was partly mine. But another part of me, the quieter part that had been suffocated for years, whispered that I didn't need to. My worth wasn't tied to his recognition, and my story didn't begin or end with a reunion I wasn't invited to. One evening, I stood in my room surrounded by relics of a life built on desperate attempts to prove myself. Old photographs where I stood at the edges, trophies I had clung to for proof of my value, certificates yellowed with time. I gathered them together. My hands shook as I lit the match, but when the flames caught, I felt a strange calm wash over me. Watching those tokens turn to ash wasn't about erasing my past. It was about releasing myself from the weight of constantly trying to be enough for someone who never wanted me to be. With that symbolic act, I began the work of building something new. I poured myself into the career path I had once hesitated to pursue, fearful of failure, fearful of his judgment. I reached out to friends I had kept at a distance, embarrassed by the mess of my family life, and discovered a warmth in them that felt more like family than blood ever had. I sought help. 2. Therapy sessions where I unpacked years of quiet rejection, pages of journaling where I gave myself the voice I had always been denied. Slowly, I stitched together a new identity. Not the overlooked child, not the ghost in the corner, but someone capable, worthy, alive. I found that my strength had never depended on my father's approval. It had been waiting inside me all along, waiting for the day I finally stopped chasing shadows. Months later, word reached me that my father had heard about my work. There had been a feature in a magazine, some recognition I hadn't even been aiming for, and suddenly his circle was buzzing with my name. When he spoke to me, his words were predictably muted. "I heard you've been doing well," he said, his voice flat, his eyes avoiding mine. It was the same dismissive tone he had always used, the same attempt to shrink me down. But something had shifted. I didn't crave the nod, the praise, the acknowledgement. I didn't ache for him to see me anymore. For the first time, I realized his approval wasn't the crown I had been chasing, it was a chain. And I had already broken it. Looking back now, I see the reunion for what it was. Yes, it hurt to be excluded. Yes, it cut deeper than anything else before it. But in that pain, I found the truth. Belonging doesn't come from those who repeatedly push you away. Belonging is something you create, something you nurture with the people who choose you, with the self you choose to become. The reunion did change everything, not because I wasn't there, but because it forced me to step out of the shadow I had lived in all my life. Being left out of that circle was the moment I finally stepped into my own. And in the quiet freedom of that choice, I found something I had been denied for years. Peace. Thanks for watching. For more videos, please subscribe. Our channel Awesome Visual Story.